Park means a lot to me in that something that will never be finished. Something that I can keep developing. Thing I can keep building as long as I can get some money to build it with. And I've felt all along, all through my career, instead of talking to somebody about something, if I could, I'd go ahead and make something and then show it to them.
Now, the people of this country are about to see and hear a new adventure in entertainment. It will come upon the American scene shortly under the title of Disneyland.
Walt Disney is the greatest creative genius in the entertainment business. He's brought new concepts to the theaters and entertained millions and millions of people.
There was quite a build-up there, and
You deserved it.
well, that's what worries me, you know.
Walt had decided in his own mind that if he was going to make this thing work, he'd have to have financing, and he was willing to do some TV shows in order to help get the financing.
He's now going to try his luck on home television, and I'm sure the same impact will be made on the home audience as Walt has made in the theater audience.
Well, I just want to assure you that we're not taking it lightly, that it's not going to be just a little stepchild of the Disney organization. It's going to be one of our major enterprises. Now, on a site of 240 acres near the city of Anaheim, we've begun to build Disneyland, the place.
When Walt described this great park, I knew that this was not a good idea because who was going to drive 30 or 40 miles?
The opening date for the park has been set for midsummer of 1955. We could never meet this deadline without the complete cooperation of everyone who works here.
Most people in Hollywood thought Disneyland would be a Hollywood spectacular, a spectacular failure. So Roy Disney said, "What do you mean, most people in Hollywood?" He says, "That's what I thought."
We want you to see and share with us the experience of building this dream into a reality.
Once the area was picked out, everything started really congealing because Walt had, in his own mind, set a deadline that was impossible to make. An opening of July of 1955, and I still don't see how it was ever done.
One day he called me up and said, "Remember I was talking about having some kind of a Disney affair here in Southern California?" And so I got in a car with him, and we rode, and we rode, and we rode, and we rode, and I thought, where the hell is he taking us to? And we got down through those orange groves. He said, "This is all top secret stuff." And I said, "Yeah, that's right." And I didn't bother to tell him I thought he was out of his mind.
This is our progress report from Disneyland. On our first television program, we showed you a blueprint for a dream. Well, this is the blueprint. And the dream is Disneyland, the park that we're constructing near Anaheim, California. We promised to keep you informed as our dream became a reality. So for a first-hand progress report, let's visit Disneyland now. One of our naturalist photographers is Stuart Jewell, an expert in time-lapse photography. We don't have these cameras up here just for fun. They keep a daily record of the growth and development of Disneyland. Now, an ordinary camera takes 24 pictures a second, but these take one picture every 15 seconds. And of course, that makes things look a lot faster on your screen. Disneyland is divided into 4 cardinal realms, the 4 different worlds from which our television shows will originate. Adventureland, Tomorrowland, Fantasyland, and Frontierland.
And Walt, even at that time, had in the back of his mind how he wanted to move people. He was anxious to just get all the ideas possible together. It was helping him to gel his concept, which I think at the time was loose and fluid and all over the place.
No, Roy always hated to be in debt, and Walt seemed to revel in the idea because we were continually in debt. And it did take that, that extraordinary blind faith, to follow Walt, because he had a rough time with banks. And they couldn't see it either. And he was always off in left field somewhere. There was nothing he could say about something except that he had a hunch it was going to work.
Believe it or not, it wasn't too easy to sell people on the success of Disneyland because there were a lot of doubting Thomases. And finally the ball began to roll and it began to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you think, well, now, what if this fails? What if the people don't like it? What if it's too far away? What if they go once and never come back? But that's Walt's problem. If he fails, then it's his failure.
We could go by car, of course. It's a pleasant 50-minute trip across town. But let's be different. Let's take to the air. Let's go by helicopter.
In order for Walt to take his guest by the hand and take him on a hike through a Missouri wilderness or anything, what he doesn't need is a high-rise building or a transmission tower or freeway interchange in the background. So number one, you build a berm because it takes berm to shut out sound. Now you're in Walt's world. That's an important function from a landscape standpoint.
Walt, he didn't want just small trees. He wanted big trees. He said trees have no scale.
So he wanted a real show on there, and he used to ride herd on Bill Evans and get bigger and better trees.
Walt didn't want to have to wait 5 years to get the landscape to harmonize with the architecture. Well, we could do that up to a point, but we ran out of dollars. We're striving for instant maturity within the constrictions of a budget, and our budget was very, very meager. I did a quick sketch of where we were going to put berms and where we were going to put boulders and where we were going to put trees, but no dimensions or anything. I planted it all by the seat of my pants.
Crazy man, crazy. Crazy man, crazy. Find me a band with a solid beat. Take my chick and we dance around. When they start rocking, boy, we start shouting, shouting, crazy man, crazy. Crazy man, crazy. Crazy man, crazy. Man, that music's gone, gone. Go, 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 everybody. Go, 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 everybody. Go, 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 everybody. Go, 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 go. Crazy man, crazy. Crazy man, crazy. Crazy man, crazy. Man, that music's gone, gone. Said crazy man, crazy. Crazy man, crazy. Crazy man, crazy. Man, that music's gone, gone. They play it soft, they play it strong, they play it wild and they play it long. They just keep playing till they break it down. To keep them rocking on, gotta say it's crazy man, crazy. Crazy man, crazy. Crazy man, crazy. Man, that music's gone, gone. Go, 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 everybody. Go, 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 everybody. Go, 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 everybody. Go, 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 go,
With so much activity and so much heavy equipment, there's bound to be an upset now and then. But the operators take these things in stride, and fortunately, we've had no serious accidents. Here's the beginning of Main Street, a composite of all the small towns in America at the turn of the century. Here you can take a ride in a horse car past the old town hall, the opera house, the firehouse, and if you stay on to the end of the line, you will reach the hub of Disneyland, where this camera tower now stands.
The budget in starting was $4.5 million. In August, it was $7 million. In December, it was $11 million. The springtime, it was anybody's guess.
And we ran out of money and almost had to stop construction at $17 million. That's what happens when you try to make a thing as special as Disneyland in a short time.
I haven't invested money in ranches. I haven't got anything here. I have a home, that's all. But this thing, I put my own money in. And I borrowed on the insurance that I've been paying on for 30 years.
Walt and I were walking around the enormous foundation for the railroad station and the underpass coming into Disneyland. And he turned to Dick Irvine and he said, well, by the time Joe gets through burying all our money underground, we won't have anything left for a show. He was really sincerely worried about the situation.
In Wilmington, California, construction was going forward on 2 steam locomotives, vintage of 1900, probably the last of their type ever to be built in the United States.
Walt just loved miniatures of almost everything, I think, and the trains were probably a kind of a personification of childhood to him. You know, it's what you grew up around. Walt was 8 years younger than Dad, and so he kind of was the little kid around the trains, and they were around the railroads a lot. When they had an uncle who was an engineer, both of them used to talk quite a lot about the thrill of going down and standing there by that great big locomotive and, you know, seeing their uncle.
I learned about trains by building one for Walt. It was the one that we built that ran around his house. We had the drawings for what is known as the Lily Bell. But having all the drawings for the little train, we got started and manufactured the locomotives, the cars. So all we had to do was expand the gauge from 1/8 scale to the 36-inch gauge track.
Back at the studio, the working models of our rides had been perfected, and we were well into construction on the real thing.
The Peter Pan ride, for instance, they had one whole warehouse building over there filled up with the overhead rails and the cars, and we did the dips and the swirls. This was something that's completely new too. I don't think there's ever been an overhead suspended ride in any amusement park, to my knowledge.
In nearby Newport, we were building and assembling miniature Autopia racing cars. These will speed along the Tomorrowland freeway. A most difficult problem was to build them to fit the varying sizes of growing youngsters. And to give it that authentic real-life feeling, our freeway will be patrolled by miniature police cars.
Every job that you work on with Walt is different, and you figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to do it just as you get started on it. We had no project managers, therefore we didn't need any coordinators. The Xerox machine hadn't been invented yet, so we didn't publish anything. All we did was just do the work. Walt never gave a thought that he was overloading people. It was like, well, okay, we're just doing it. So you do all this stuff sort of at once. You didn't dilly-dally on decisions. And it's up to Walt to run around and catch you that it's not going the way he wants it. That's his problem.
And there was a lot of people that said, he's done. If it had gone down, the studio would have gone down with it because everything was tied up in the park.
They had a lot of problems getting the place open by that opening day. They dug out the rivers of America, and they filled it up with water one night, came back the next morning, it was totally dry. There was a sandy soil and the water just plain disappeared.
We started to experiment with the waterway for the big rivers of America. First of all, we used the bentonite or whatever it was. It's a gooey thing that was supposed to make it waterproof bottom. And that didn't work too well.
Everything wasn't sweetness and light and beautiful during the construction. Walt always came down on Sunday morning and he looked all around, all over everything. And he took a couple of big sighs and he turned to me and he says, "Do you know something?" And he says, "I just got some figures today." And he said, "We've spent a little over half the money that we have to spend on this park." And he says, "There isn't one thing there or there or there or there but holes in the ground and piles of dirt. There isn't one thing that any human being would spend 15 cents to come and see." And he said, "I'm scared." And he was. And it was, you couldn't believe that you spent half this, it seemed like an enormous amount of money. And there was nothing there that anybody would give a darn about. He just sat there, he didn't say anything for long. And it really impressed upon me on what responsibility was and what worry was. Because I was worried about little things, about whether this was going to get done and whether this and that and all. But this is something that hadn't occurred to me because I didn't know anything about it. But this is what worry is. And I was brought home to me that day.
Inside Stage 3 nearby, we started construction on a 105-foot American riverboat, the stern wheeler Mark Twain. Since the deck slopes from one end to the other, each piece of wood had to be individually cut and fitted. Constructing such a large boat inside a building 50 miles from water caused a lot of raised eyebrows. But unlike the fellow who built a boat in his basement and couldn't get it out, we had a plan. Well, we fooled nearly everyone, for it was designed to come apart in sections for shipping.
Walt, right from the beginning, made up his mind that he would have something different. He would have the concept of a family amusement park. And we were highly criticized at the beginning by some of the old-time operators of the amusement park as spending too much money, going into too much detail.
Before the park opened, we went to various key amusement parks in the country and manufacturers to see if they would be interested in manufacturing things that we had designed. Almost invariably, the manufacturers would say, well, that would be pretty hard to do. Why don't you buy one of our things? So there's the typical amusement park ride, you know, they were for sale. But with Walt, we can't do this. And so these beautiful things were all made, and they were not practical, and he knew they were not practical.
The idea for a Disneyland lay dormant all those years. It came along when I was taking my kids around to these kiddie parks, and I'd take them around. We used to go out, every Saturday and Sunday. Their mother wouldn't go with us, we'd be gone. I took them zoos, I took them everywhere. And they used to love to go with me in those days, and that was some of the happiest days of my life.
All my life, I heard him talk about doing this kind of a park. And as the years went on, from the time I was 5 and until he finally did it when I was 21, the dream just grew from this very humble little thing that maybe would be contained on the studio lot to something quite grand. I think everyone thought he was crazy, like they did when he said he wanted to do a feature-length cartoon.
You have to look at this in some respects as a kind of it was a huge experiment. This was the genesis of that kind of park. What Walt started out to do, for heaven's sakes, was to do something as radically different from Coney Island as he could dream up.
knew everything that went into that park. He knew where every pipe was. The only thing that he didn't realize, and that was hard for him to learn, the necessity of building concrete. He thought we could build it like a motion picture set on a temporary basis. So he never got over and was awful mad at the Adventureland waterfall because of all the concrete that went into it.
Upriver, other workmen were just as busy solving the problem of how to build a rock. Creating beautiful rock formations is nothing for Mother Nature, but it wasn't so easy for us.
I was supposed to look at the cost sheets when they came in every day, but I failed in arithmetic in high school. And I didn't know whether we were in the black or in the red. But if nobody had come over and said, you're running over, I didn't say anything. And Walt would come in and he'd say, how much money have you spent so far on this thing? And I said, well, now let me see. And he said, I'll tell you. And he'd tell me exactly.
When Disneyland was under construction, there were so many people at the studio all working on this crazy idea for an amusement park. In one way, it seemed crazy. On another way, it seemed completely natural. We really didn't have what you would say administrative offices. We just had people everywhere.
Tweedly, tweedly, tweedly dee. I'm as happy as can be.
You kind of hated to go home at the end of the day because, oh gosh, you'd have to go home and go to bed and then get up the next morning and drive all the way back and keep going again. So it was kind of an inconvenience to stop and have to go home.
Tweedly, tweedly, tweedly da. How you gonna keep that honey you got? Honkies, honkies, pieces bite. I'm gonna see my honey tonight. Tweedly, tweedly, tweedly da. Tweedly dum, tweedly dum. Give it up, give it up, give your love to me.
Well, here we are inside Disneyland. Yes, we're in the park all right, but we haven't left our problems behind at the studio. We've just concentrated a lot of them in one place here.
When we started out, Walt didn't know how to read a plan. And he would never say so. But we used to try and fool him about it. So it wasn't soon until he not only could read a plan, he could read it better than all of us, and he had a better feeling of proportion than any of us did, because he knew exactly what he wanted in the way of scaled down version of Main Street.
We built Disneyland with probably not 10% of the plans to start with. The plans were developed as we went along.
I think Walt was convinced that if his guests were exposed to good taste, good quality, good design, they would sort of subconsciously perceive this. Not as a consequence of being educated in landscape design or in architecture or anything else, but they would subconsciously know the difference between good and bad.
They were bringing in various landscape architects to do different projects. And Walt Disney became worried that because so many people were in it, it wouldn't hang together. And so that's the way I started. So I made a plan of Main Street and the hub, and they called a meeting of all the art directors, and Walt was there, and they approved it. Roy Disney said, don't ever bother him with a problem. If you have a problem, come to us. Let him dream. So every Saturday, he would come down, and we'd go around with all the art directors, and he would have new ideas, something to be done. And he wanted to start it Monday morning. He didn't want plans Monday morning. So many a weekend, I'd work till midnight, getting out sketches or something. And that's the way it went.
The thing that I remember about it is that while Walt had a temper and he could demand things to be done because he expected everybody to do what he did.
In Disneyland, we had very acute problems there. I was advised by 2 or 3 of my major assistants, under no circumstances should we try to continue to open in July. We should postpone until September. But we said no. It was so important in the minds of the public that we were going to open in July. And as a matter of fact, if we had waited until September with all of our problems financially and so forth, we might never have gotten off the ground.
It was a learning process all the way through. And the thing I liked the most about those days was it was a great thing to have somebody say, well, let's do it.
By now, all over the studio, hammers and saws were quickly being replaced by paint and brushes, for the deadline was drawing near. The hurry up, paint up, finish up campaign began in earnest.
Well, it seems that there's always pressure. I suppose it's part of the nature, I guess, of show business. And of course, part of it is opportunity, and part of it is sensing the moment has come. And Walt, being that intuitive man he was, of course, sensed it was a time for this. And he did put pressure on us, and we did do it.
This was our big bugaboo. What were you going to do with it Tomorrowland? We had to have it. You couldn't say we didn't want it. And we struggled so hard. One day, Walt and I drove down together to Disneyland. And he said, Hurley, you know the worst thing that could happen to us, don't you? And I said, well, what do you mean, the worst thing could happen? And he said, well, worst thing could happen would be that I'd go broke. And I said, yeah, I guess that'd be pretty bad. And he said, I've been broke 5 times in my life, and one more won't hurt.
If your team is sympathetic and you all have the same goals, why, you arrive at something that's greater than the sum of the parts, of course. And I think it's well known that this kind of thing works that way. You build a kind of enthusiasm and you share something. Sometimes it becomes a little ridiculous and you just end up with fun. But most of the time, you turn over things by a mutual stimulation that you'd never arrived at by yourself. Walt was a real master at provoking that type of atmosphere.
Here on the shores, we come upon the realm of the creatures of the Serengeti Plain. Towering above them all, the giraffe. To reproduce these animals requires the combined efforts of the finest designers, sculptors, and master mechanics.
I was determined that I was going to have the first ride when the first boat got in the ride with water in it. I was going to ride first and find out if the person got wet. Because I had conceived the idea of going behind the waterfall. So I went slow and around and looked at everything, looked back to see the clearance and everything. And as I started under the waterfall, I got right in it, and then I looked back to see where the stern was, and there was Walt sitting there. My heart stopped beating. I was clear through the waterfall before I came to. He stepped on board very carefully, just as I left, and I didn't know it.
Presenting this week, the pre-opening report from Disneyland. In our first television show last year, we described to you our hopes and plans for a place called Disneyland. A few months ago, in a progress report, we showed you the actual start of construction. In our mail recently, a lot of you have shown interest in our progress. And so this week, just a matter of days away from the formal opening of Disneyland, we want to bring you up to date on what's been happening and let you share with us the joys and anxieties of our race against time. In this, our final report on building a Disneyland, I want to pay tribute to the many studio artists, craftsmen, and engineers whose untiring efforts helped bring this dream into a reality. Without their skills and imagination, Disneyland would not have been possible.
Those last few days were frantic. I saw gardeners spraying bushes and flowers and things with paint because they had died. So instead of with water, they were painting the grass, bushes, trees.
Prior to the opening, there was a plumbing strike. So the decision was, should we have drinking fountains or restrooms? Because there literally wasn't enough time to get both done. And Walt said, well, you know, we've got to have restrooms, and people can drink Coke and Pepsi, but they can't pee in the street.
We had a gas leak under the castle, and you could see the little blue flames coming all around the perimeter and the foundation of the castle. I was unaware of this, of course, at the time, but so I was smoking my pipe as usual and walking up from the hub. All of a sudden, the fire chief at the time came running out and grabbed me. We waltzed all the way back down to the hub. He said, don't you know, there's a fire out there. I'd blow up the castle.
Well, the pressures were tremendous on everybody. We all lived down there, and we worked from early morning to late at night. We were on a 48-hour week. Walt used to come over on Saturday, and we'd all go to lunch together and come back and work some more. And he was right on top of us.
As far as the opening period, it was very hectic. I know at the time. We lived down there. We lived over the City Hall. We did all our last drawings on the second floor of the City Hall there, and we were right on the spot.
It was just like a great big panic all the time. It was a miracle that it ever went on, and just as it was a miracle that Disneyland ever got open on date.
See, people have looked at me in many ways. They said, well, I mean, look, the guy has no regard for money. That is not true. I have regard for money. There's some people that sit and worship money as something you've got to have piled up in a big pile somewhere. I've only thought of money in one way, and that is to do something. I don't think there's a thing that I own that I'll ever get the benefit of except through doing things with it.
We were learners, Walt said, and I didn't have enough money to do any more than that. I had to borrow, as you know, ABC and my insurance and mortgage the house. There are delays by suppliers, there are breakdowns and threatened strikes. But Walt was daring. He put everything on the line. And his beliefs. How many guys will do that?
July, we had a party at Disneyland. And the first time we were allowed to run the train around the park was that day. And also the riverboat ran that day.
Walt was living down there, and he was out there early morning, seeing how everything was going. Just before opening, Tomorrowland wasn't finished, and we had to get in and do a quick and dirty dressing job.
Before Disneyland opened, well, everything was in utter turmoil. And in Tomorrowland, we had these big buildings on both sides, but nothing in them.
We hope you all will be listening and watching next Sunday, July 17th, when we present the formal opening of Disneyland in an hour-and-a-half show over most of these stations.
These are just some of the sights that ABC undertook to show a waiting nation on the world's largest live telecast. It all started when Mr. Kentner said to Mr. Disney, "How about ABC televising the opening of Disneyland?" Mr. Disney thought it was a fine idea. After all the preliminary planning, the camera crews started rehearsing their moves. Calls were sent out all over the nation, rounding up equipment. Getting 85,000 feet of cable, including 16,000 feet of coaxial, was no easy task in itself. 13 hydraulic forklifts were brought in and were set about building special camera platforms and mounting them onto these lifts. The forklift operators had to be rehearsed. There was always the danger they wouldn't stop the lifts in time and pull the cables out of the camera.
My work at the time was getting Casey Jr. running. And I was testing it before opening. And the train started up to the first lift and started going over. We shut the ride down, of course, to find out why this happened. Discovered, well, there was no safety rail around the track, so we couldn't open the ride. But I was to run the locomotive once around the track for the TV show.
All the time we were trying to rehearse, the workmen were still building Disneyland. Another one of our small problems, that's asphalt, not sand. We did manage to get some work done in spite of all the frantic last-minute construction, and men and material and trucks kept passing through in a frantic effort to finish on time. This kept rehearsal virtually at a standstill. Just before showtime, the last preparations were being made. And then, ready, Fantasyland, Frontierland, Adventureland, Main Street, Tomorrowland. Stand by, 5 seconds, and here's the show.
Everyone, this is Hank Weaver. For the past year, this signature has announced the opening of Disneyland, the show. Now, it announces the opening of Disneyland, the place. The people and eyes around the world are focused on these 160 acres here in Anaheim, California. This afternoon, Disneyland, the world's most fabulous kingdom, will be unveiled before an invitational world premiere, and you are guests. To start the proceedings, we take you to the entrance of Disneyland and your host, Art Linkletter.
I'm standing here on the railroad tracks, and I'm in front of the big Disneyland and Santa Fe Railroad Station. And down these tracks, in just a couple of seconds, will come Walt Disney himself, barreling in a railroad train built to 5/8 miniature size.
Fine. The governor had her around through Frontierland, and then Fred Gurley there, he took her around. I picked her up and brought her in. Highballing in.
Hello, Governor.
Glad to see you, Art.
Governor Knight of California, ladies and gentlemen, and Walt Disney, of course, and Mr. Gurley, the president of the Santa Fe.
And of the Santa Fe and Disneyland, if you please.
That's right. Thousands are coming in. They're going through the magic tunnel on foot because no car can enter here. And like Alice in Wonderland, as you go on through that tunnel past the Disneyland Santa Fe, you find yourself in a bygone time, another world. The clock has turned back a half a century, and you're in the main square of a small American town, the year 1900.
I was just one of the sweaty people trying to find our way through it was a rat maze down there. Everybody had been out celebrating a little the night before, so there were more than a few hangovers. It was not the best of all days.
Most people remember the opening day as a total disaster because they had almost twice as many people as they had planned for. They ran out of food. Almost every imaginable thing that could went wrong.
Women had to wear high heels all the time and hose. Hot weather, like the opening of Disneyland. It was a ferocious day. But you had to give all credit for a most impressive idea all the way. You couldn't knock a man that thought like that.
All activity on Main Street has ceased.
Walt Disney will step forward to read the dedication of Disneyland.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome. Disneyland is your land. Here age relives fond memories of the past, and here youth may savor the challenge and promise of the future. Disneyland is dedicated to the ideals, the dreams, and the hard facts that have created America, with the hope that it will be a source of joy and inspiration to all the world. Thank you.
Standing here has been one of the most exciting moments of my life. I think, ladies and gentlemen, that anyone who's been here today will say, as the people did many years ago when they were at the opening of the Eiffel Tower, I was there. I'm very proud to say I was at the opening of Disneyland. It's a fabulous thing to happen, ladies and gentlemen.
We didn't lack faith in the idea that it was going to be something good. It was other people that were sure that it was not going to be a success. I don't think it was true with the people in the creative departments.
Walt, he says, all I want is that when people walk through or ride through or have access to anything that you design, I want them, when they leave, to have a smile on their face. And he said, you just remember that, and that's all I ask of you as a designer. Make it pretty, but make it so that the people will come out smiling.
The press was not very complimentary to our opening. But that's part of the cost of this business of being in show business in Hollywood, and that is they're looking for any kind of little cracks or any kind of things they can magnify.
Right now, it's my pleasure to introduce the lovely lady and famous star whom Mr. Disney has asked to christen the Mark Twain. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Irene Dunn. Hello, Irene.
How are you? It's listing.
It's listing a little because it'll be shoving off in a moment. And there the boat is christened, and it starts on its daily trips up and down the rivers of the world, of America, that is. Thank you, Miss Dunn. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I've got other places to go, and the Commodore, Admiral Joe Fowler, up there in the wheelhouse, looks like they're getting ready to shove off, so I better... Goodbye, Irene. Goodbye, everybody. Have a good ride. There goes the whistle. Take her away, Admiral. Goodbye.
For our preview of Tomorrowland, I'd like to read these few words of dedication. A vista into a world of wondrous ideas, signifying man's achievement, a step into the future, with predictions of constructive things to come. Tomorrow offers new frontiers in science, adventure, and ideals, the atomic age, the challenge of outer space, and the hope for a peaceful and unified world.
Those doves are, ladies and gentlemen, I hope, the harbingers of peace for the world of tomorrow.
But I think it comes back to the way people feel. They feel better about themselves. I think if we give people confidence, we make them feel that they can handle anything. It seems to me it not only reduces the fear, but it makes them better people. And there is hope.
Walt, you've made a bum out of Barnum today, but we've got to go.
I know, but I just want to say a word of thanks to all the artists, the workers, and everybody that helped make this dream come true.
Let's go into Fantasyland and have some fun.
Let's go.
Goodbye, folks.